Hi, I'm Kissiah. Thank you for joining me here on the mat where we carve out a little bit of time to pause and go inward to be with ourselves, to find the still, quiet voice, to reconnect with who we are. Thank you for being here, for joining me here on the mat. This is a space where we pause, where we carve out some time to just be. So often we don't do that. We go and go and go and go and go. We prioritize everything and everyone else. And many just, there's no time to drop in and pause. So on the mat is really a drop in and pause. And in addition to that, it's a coming together to talk about the real things of life, specifically loss and grief, death, dying, diagnoses. It's a space to lay it all down and give ourselves to ourselves in a way where we can be present. So thank you for being here, truly. And if it's your first time swinging around, welcome. I appreciate your presence. And if it's not your first time swinging around, welcome. And welcome back. I appreciate your presence. On Instagram today, you know how now you can do the note. You can add a little note to your profile. On mine, I ask the question, what grief do you carry? And I think that's a wonderful way of being and dropping in right now, to give thought to what grief you carry. And it could be, what grief do you carry like right now? Not what grief have you carried, do you carry ongoing, but literally in this moment, what grief do you carry? And I'm thinking about myself. What grief am I carrying in this moment? What has access to me in that way that gives rise to maybe a level of melancholy or pain, sadness? What grief do you carry? And is that something that you're even in touch with? What do you mean, what grief do I carry? No one has died. That's the magnanimous nature of grief. It's not just about death and dying. It's really interwoven. Just in life, when we think about the fullness of our lives, there's grief all around. I can access just a grief of not having a relationship as a child growing up, and then even into, of course, adult years with my mother. There's a grief to that, right? The grief of something that goes missing. Not as a result of death or dying, but as a result of it not being available or present, or fill in the blank. What grief do we carry? And what do we do with it in this moment? What do we do with the grief that we become aware of? What do I do when I pause and just think on my mother, who's still alive, who of course did the best she could? There's that, it took me a long time to be okay with it. I did the best I could. There's something about that didn't land right away. What do you mean you did the best you had? You could with what you had. When I access that, the grief of what went missing, a lot of times I just allow the sensations of it, even if that means tears, just wash over me. Let the energy wash over me and feel it. Like feel the fullness of that sadness, of the adolescent me. You know, the adolescent me who didn't have something that I needed. All of my needs were met, but the emotional, the presence there, you know, it's so important. And when whatever it is that we need goes missing, it doesn't mean that we're harboring resentments or anger, although anger, all of that can be real. But it means it's there. We don't have to harbor anything. It just means that it's there. You know, we can forgive, we can do all of those things, and we can still feel that empty thing. You know, grief can be accessible and inaccessible. Right? It's the thing we can feel and experience, and then it's so big that it can, you know, defy description. It can be the thing that slips through our fingers. We can't hold it. How do you feel? It's just grief. It's so magical and haunting at the same time. There's a simultaneity of like love and pain. When I think on what went missing, it's a real thing. And you know what's interesting about the grief of something that went missing is that it remains there. It remains in that space of missingness. We can't feel it. You know, you can't take that it went missing and give something to it, to supplement, to fulfill. No, it remains empty. Because you can't go back to that time. You can't put the thing that you needed in there. And so when something goes missing, there's a grief there that just lives alongside us. You know, we walk almost holding hands with it. And in moments, it rises to the top and it washes over us. Do you deny it? Do you become angry at the sadness, become angry at the grief that you carry because you don't want to carry it because it should have been different? It could have been so much better. Or if only, or why? You know, all of those questions and thoughts that think us no place well. They think us sort of in a cyclic way. But it's real. The grief we carry is real. And today, this is just a pause to take a moment to give thought to that. To be with ourselves and hold our grief. I often say, the grief we carry must be held. The grief we carry must be held. The grief we carry must be held. How do you hold the grief that you carry? How do I hold the grief that I carry? I want to invite us to give grief its due. Give it the room and space that it needs in the moments that it needs room and space. When it shows up, to turn toward it and sort of embrace it rather than turning away and resisting or denying it. But to pause and be with it, it's important. And here on the mat, we think on these things in the pause. We allow ourselves the moment of taking it all off and just sort of decompressing into a spacious, real place. Investigate the happenings within us so that we can grow in connection with ourselves, so that we can understand and hear ourselves better, more clearly. This might be the only pause of your day. And it's a conscious one that you're taking. And you're sharing it with me, and I'm sharing mine with you. We breathe here on the mat. We take conscious breaths. And we return to ourselves. We are important. We deserve our own time and attention. We need these breaks to reflect, to think on things. And today we think on the question, what grief do I carry? And then when you get in touch with that, if you feel so inclined to ask yourself the next question, sort of a follow-up, and what do I do with the grief that I carry? Like, how do I hold it? What grief do I carry? And how do I hold that grief? And we breathe into that. We breathe into that. Thank you for pausing here with me today on the mat and being willing to investigate your grief today, like in this moment, the grief you may carry, and how it is that you hold that grief. I appreciate your time and your presence, truly. Thank you for joining me here on the mat. May you be well.